I'm starting. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session about joining a master's degree at ESPOL. So what I thought we would be doing today is basically going through the different programs and explaining to you what we're offering at ESPOL in terms of the programs, but also basically the very basic structure of everything we're doing, presenting the different courses, obviously, and also other activities, because of course I know students like the courses, but they also like to know what other types of activities we offer during the program. So as you probably know, bonjour. As you probably know, at ESPOL, so that's just a basic structure of the presentation, but as you probably know, at ESPOL, we've got 4 different master's programs. I'm hesitating. Yeah, thanks. I'm hesitating between 3 and 4 because until now we had 3 programs, one in global and European politics, one in international and security politics, and one in food politics and sustainable development. And as of next year, we're opening also a new program, which we're very excited about, which is called Digital Politics and Governance. And Professor von NOSTITZ is here to present also this program to you. So before we start, perhaps a few words on us. So Professor von NOSTITZ is an associate professor here at ESPOL, and he specialized mostly in party politics and digital politics. And I'm also an associate professor here. I'm more specialized on non-digital matters, unfortunately. I know it's less interesting, but still. And I'm also heading the pedagogy of the school, so I'm basically handling the different programs this year. So perhaps to start, I was gonna explain to you that every program is very specific. So there are lots of differences between the 4 programs, and since last year, we've even reformed a bit the program to make sure they're very different in their core courses. So each program really has its identity, and that's what we're going to see today, presenting the 4 different programs. However, before presenting to you the differences, I still wanted to explain to you the general ideas, the general pedagogical underpinning of the different programs, and what they nevertheless have in common, because they still have a few things in common, in particular the way they're conceived pedagogically. So perhaps, yeah, you can. Thank you very much, Felix. Well, the first thing, of course, is that they are master's program in political and social science. So they're all by essence multidisciplinary. Okay, they all have a multidisciplinary outlook of the different topics we're offering. As you perhaps know, especially those of you who are already bachelor students in politics or in political science or in the social science, political science is not a sui generis field. It's really much linked to other fields like law, history, economics, etc., etc. So that's also something that reflects very strongly, of course, in our different programs. The 4 programs also have in common the fact that they are based on an in-depth methodological training. And at the end of the program, the students are required to write what we call the master's dissertation. That's not very specific to our program. I think almost all programs over the world, I would say, in political science ask for a master's dissertation. But in our program, what we're trying to implement is really a follow-up and offering different research courses and methodological courses as we go, so all along the different semester, to be able to reach this final goal, final stressful goal, I have to say, for the students, which is ending in their master's dissertation in the end of the 2nd year. So we offer, I'm not sure you can see, so I'm going to say it orally, it's going to be easier. We offer very different courses regarding the methods, the way we actually do political science. We start in the 1st semester with a course called academic writing. So that's where actually, Professor von NOSTITZ is the one coordinating this course. That's a course where we actually explain to the students how do we write in an academic way in English, which is also a bit specific, obviously. Then we have a course on Introduction to Research and Epistemology in the 2nd semester. Then in the 3rd semester, we do a kind of block course where we really present the different methods in political science. Some students will prefer to work on more qualitative approaches. Perhaps they will do interviews or analyze documents. Some will prefer to work more on the quantitative side, working with statistics, basically. So those 2 approaches are totally fine with us, and we train students to do both. But all the students, in fact, still have to do the last methodological course, which is a course on quantitative approaches to political science, or it's called Statistics and the Political Sociology of quantification. So those are the 4 basic research courses that are common to the different programs. I often got the questions of whether this is a research master's. As you know, in France, doesn't exist anymore the difference between research and practical masters. So our program is not different than the other in that regard. It's not a research master's program, but it does have a strong research outlook, I would say. We insist very much on the fact that students should be aware of the different steps of research, and also in the different courses, they're very much based on the latest research. So our professors really much use current research in social sciences to teach their own course. What does that mean concretely for the students? Lots of readings, lots and lots of readings. And also that a lot of the courses are given as seminars. So students come and discuss in kind of an Anglo-Saxon manner, if I may say. And that's how the courses are given mostly in the masters. Also, they also have lectures, so it's kind of half-half. There are some lectures, but there are lots of seminars, forms of teaching. That being said, so this research component is important, but that being said, we also have a practical side, a practical aspect, let's say, in our courses. Each program has project courses, so students work on concrete projects. For instance, this year, we have students working on, it's going to make you smile, but on putting forward a program to have a cafeteria at ESPOL, a sustainable cafeteria. That's a project course they're doing at the moment. But that's just an example. Of course, we've got other examples of courses that we're doing that are a bit more practical oriented. Then we don't all want to work in a cafeteria, so there are also, of course, other practical aspects that we're working on in the course. Especially they are policy-based courses, so courses where the students work on how a specific policy is handled and with practical examples. Another common aspect of the maquette that perhaps you can't really see very well, because it's at the bottom, is that all students do a language course every semester. So I lost a candidate already.
I think they're working for the bachelor presentation.
Okay, no problem. So I was saying, so non-native French students, so that perhaps doesn't concern you, have a French course, and non-native English, or let's say French students, have an English compulsory course through all the 4 semesters of the program. Okay, and that counts for 2 ECTS, so they really have to attend the course. We also offer an extra language course, so students can also take another course, another language course if they want, for which we have a plethora of choices. So you could take Spanish, Italian, German. Those are not very original, let's say, but you could also follow, if you want, a course in Chinese language, in Russian, in Arabic, in Serbian and Croatian even language. So they have all these different options that the students can choose from as an option. To be very honest, so this is not counting in the ECTS of the program, this is just an extra offer of the program. To be very honest, very often the students start and then they're a bit overwhelmed by the other courses, and after a semester or a year, usually they stop doing their optional language course, but that's still an option. What else do they have in common? Well, they have in common the fact, of course, that we're putting a lot of emphasis on career development. So we've organizing, and I'm not the one, it's more the communication and development office, organizing a lot of career events during the semester. For instance, last week was a career week where alumni come and talk to the students, and different kinds of workshops are organized for the students to help them with a CV, with their motivation letters, and so on and so forth. And so students are a lot in contact with professionals, not only with us professors in a daily basis. Also, and that's also something that I think exists in a lot of programs, students have to do a 3-month internship. They can do more, but at least 3 months of internship during their 2 years at ESPOL. And so through this, we also try to improve their professional skills. They can choose any internship they would want. Well, first, it's not that easy to find one, so it takes them some time to find one. We help them as much as we can. And then, of course, this internship has to be linked to their program. So they can't do an internship in a bakery, for instance. I don't know why I'm taking this example. Yeah, perhaps I could consider it. But in general, they they're a bit stressed to find it, but that goes very well. Students generally think it's great to have at least this kind of experience. Often they do it at the end of their master program, and so they're very fit afterwards to enter the job market with that experience already done. And another, oh, but that's just a second. Another bit exciting news. I wouldn't necessarily think it's central to the program, but I think students think it's central to the program, so I'm still saying it. Students, of course, are allowed, or no, they're not allowed, they're obliged to go on a study trip each year. No, in the first year, that in the second year we organize more field trip, but in the first year we do a 4 days, study trip in one of the city that you see on the map, on the slide, sorry. It's not that you draw and, you know, if you're lucky, you go to Rome, and if you're unlucky, you go to Geneva. That's not how it works. No, I'm saying that because I was in Geneva last January, and it wasn't that easy, really, in terms of the weather. So, because as you see, it's in January. But the students of the Global and European Politics and International and Security Politics program go to Geneva. The students of the Food Politics and Sustainable Development program go to Rome, and the students of the Digital Politics and Governance program will go to Tallinn, which will be the next addition to the program next year. And last common things. If some of you are interested to go abroad during the master, that's possible, but we want that to be in the first year, because the second year, of course, is much more specialized, so it would be a bit complicated to actually have you going abroad, so we limit that to the second semester. So if you want to go abroad, you need to start applying at the very beginning of arriving at ESPOL, because then you're going to go in the second semester. We've got, honestly, there aren't that many students that go, perhaps 2 or 3 students every year in the 4 masters together, because students, I mean, they came to study a specific thing here, so it's not like they really want to go somewhere else and study something else. But I mean, we had students going to fancy destinations in the past, like Kyrgyzstan. So that's a possibility we offer.
And I think one of the major reasons is that we have a lot of international students who are coming to France. So they're not intending to go away immediately again, right? So that's a reason.
Yeah, and that's perhaps a question you had. I don't mean to ask questions instead of you, but often I'm being asked how many French students and foreign students we have. Those are very international master programs, much more than our bachelor programs in that sense. So we've got around 1/3 of French students and 2/3 of international students, okay, coming specifically for the programs. So now I suggest we go through the 4 different programs one by one to actually understand what they're about, and perhaps we start with the Digital Politics and Governance program. Yeah, please come here, you can prepare it.
All right. So just to introduce myself again, my name is Felix NOSTITZ. I'm the co-director of the Master in Digital Policies and Governance, together with my colleague Julia Sanri, who cannot be here today, but she sends her regards as well. So I wanted to start with a slide asking you, well, you know, there's a hint, it's all about digital. What are all these dots have in common? Anyone wants to have a guess? There don't look like much of a pattern. Yeah? The answer was biggest French city. No, not really. Yeah? No, neither.
There aren't that many.
No. Okay, so they're all smart cities. So they're all cities. Yeah, they're all smart cities. So they all have invested in digital infrastructure for very specific purposes. And they all differ in what they invested in. So some have invested in sensor system all over the city to regulate parking systems and to find parking spaces. Others have regulated in smart traffic lights to turn them on and off when there are more or less cars. Some have invested in certain open data sharing platforms so that citizens can have access to the data of what the local government is doing, how much money they're spending, and so on and so forth. Others even went further and started to use digital tools to include citizens in decision-making processes, whether it's to decide about your local budget, whether it's to submit proposals for um, for projects, and then have citizens vote on them, right? But so we can see there are different degrees of this, but we are now currently at a crossroad between whether this different kind of technology, so its role, its nature, and its shape, how it will affect society and politics. And there are like two different visions that we can have. Either, of course, we can have it going into like a dystopian vision where all this technology becomes a part of a larger surveillance structure where we have this idea of surveillance capitalism or complete transparency of what citizens do and we know everything about them, right? So we move towards a kind of nature of digital authoritarianism. Or, of course, we can use this technology to enhance and improve democracy. So we can use this technology to make existing processes more efficient and better, right? We can think about electronic voting. We can think about maybe doing your taxes online or submitting for like your driving license or renewing your passport online and making existing processes more practical and more efficient, or even creating new processes and enhancing the democratic participation of citizens by deciding exactly on how your city spends its money, to vote on important projects. I don't know, to be able to report problems in your neighborhood on apps, which is like, for example, Fix My Street, or there's a very famous app in Boston, which is called the Boston Street Bump app, which basically allows you by activating your app on the phone and through the vibration of the street, the city management knows where there are too many potholes and bumps, and so can fix the street much more effectively, right? So we can really enhance it. But of course, we are currently at this question, where do we go? And I'm not even starting to talk about artificial intelligence and the problem that can cause or the benefits it can bring, right? Because I mean, I think we're all aware of ChatGPT, but and you all know about how it helps you to maybe write your essays, which you shouldn't do, but it has even more bigger consequences being used by police forces to create networks and profiles. And so innocent people find themselves in this interaction, in this network diagrams, because, for example, if you're a lawyer defending criminals, you automatically enter in it. So we have bigger questions about artificial intelligence and its democratic value or not. So we try in this new master to address all these points. So basically looking at how digital technology and the digital transformation overall affects global and European and national politics, how it affects how we make decisions and on what basis we make decisions, so which data we use, but of course how it also affects the relation of humans with technology, right? And how the interaction between humans and technology, and how that might advantage or disadvantage certain groups. So we try to basically take this phenomenon of digitalization as an overall phenomenon, an overall development that affects all different aspects of individual society and also governance, right? And international relations, of course, as well. Because as you can see in our courses, and I will show you a bit more detail, we have, okay, sorry. We have to improve the quality of the pictures. We have courses that also cover topics like digital diplomacy or e-governance, right? But on a more basic level, we have courses such as Introduction to Digital Governance and courses to Introduction to Digital Democracy. And as you might not be able to see here, but again, it's on the website, we have built a specific structure of courses really related to the digital. And that includes also this balance between research courses and practical courses. So on the research side, for example, you have a course in the second year that is methods for digital analysis. So you can understand the basic function, how you can use big data or data provided, trace data provided by websites, or the use of IPAs to analyze data, right? Because that's becoming more and more important to understand how people interact with technology and how effective are technology to reaching different groups. On top of that, for the practical element, for example, we have two courses such as Digital Politics and Practice, where we currently work together with a variety of either big companies, civil society organizations, and really interestingly, with a lot of our former alumni who are now working in the tech industry in various different functions, to create a course for you to really see where the skills can take you, right? And there are a lot of demands for jobs in the digital, whether it is as programming people or people working in social media management or social community management, or people who just have to have the basic understanding of infrastructure and IT skills to be functional in modern bureaucratic processes, right? So there's a big demand here. I think one final thing I want to stress that is really nice in our course is that, and that's a bit going back to what my colleague said, that political science is not a field in isolation, but interacts with a lot of fields. We put also a strong emphasis on the legal aspect of digital technology. So looking question of data protection, data sharing, and so we work there together with our partners in the law faculty, and we will have a summer school in the end of the first year, which is held in the Paris campus of our university, which will give you on top of your master degree here, if you pass all the courses, a diplôme universitaire on a digital like on digital law, and to be an expert, or like to have a first insight into data protection regulations in the European Union. So you can get a second little diploma on top of your diploma if you pass all the courses in that special unit. And of course, as I said, we hope that all these courses, so the academic courses, the research courses, the more practical courses, in combination with the legal basis that you might have, allows you to have access to lots of different kinds of jobs. Then I already said, there's a lot of jobs. I don't know how many have seen that. There was a big newspaper, a big article recently in the local newspaper here, that they're looking for lots of jobs in the tech sector. And Lille is very known for jobs in the tech sector because there's Eurotechnologie, whereas IBM and other big tech companies, and they're growing a lot. So maybe you will even find internships there or permanent positions there afterwards. So this is what we hope. Of course, you can work in big tech companies for their public affairs, maybe in their data protection team or data personal data teams, yes. Or you might work for politicians in their communications team, right? To run their campaigns, to help them their social media management, and so on and so forth. And of course, there are lots of other international organizations and European organizations, NGOs, that are looking for people working on digital technology, whether it is about regulations on the digital, whether it's about the ethics of using of digital technology, whether it's about promoting digital inclusion and overcoming the digital gap, right? So for example, and last example, then I will hand over back to my colleague, is that I mean, recently talking to people working in the social services and especially social housing projects, that they're looking desperately for people who can help them to train people how to use digital technology to apply for everything from unemployment to child benefit. But people do not have the technology at home, neither the skills, or are not effective enough to use it in the private, in the library, and so they're not quick enough. I don't know. So that's even in this kind of very basic level important for people to understand how digital technology works. So if you have any question about the program, do not hesitate to ask, but I hope you have now an interest in joining our master in digital technology, digital politics and governance. Thank you.
All right. The next master that we wanted to present to you is the program in food politics and sustainable development. And in that program, basically what we're doing is simply looking at the ways in which public authorities and private actors shape and transform what we call the agri-food system. What do I mean by public authorities? I mean regional bodies, nation states, obviously, European institutions, UN agencies. All these actors are public actors that are involved in the agri-food system. And on the private side, we've got actors such as, of course, individuals. It's very important to understand how individuals interact with the food system, but also, of course, farming communities, and organizations, transnational businesses, and NGOs. So those are the types of actors we're looking at in this program. Because as you know, if the production, and that's the biggest paradox of the food system, that the production of food is initiated at the local level, but then the distribution and consumption of food, of course, has national and most often global implications. So that this is the kind of tensions we're looking at. And we believe in this program that understanding analyzing, and also acting upon this implication is actually the key to also sustainably govern and transform our food systems in the future. Okay, so that's the kind of issue we're looking at. Now you've noticed perhaps that the program is not only about food politics, but it's also about sustainable development. Because in fact, it has a broader outlook than just looking at the food system. What do we mean by sustainable development? Perhaps that's a concept that you're familiar with. It basically means that we look at the interaction between three different objectives: environmental objectives, economic objectives, and social objectives. So the questions of the interactions between these different aspects in the food system, but also in other aspects of social life, is also a very important aspect of this program. So more concretely, what are the kind of issue we look at in this program? The organization and regulation of the food system. I think we don't really, from the top of our mind, knows how the food system works. So already having this clear idea is a start for the program. Then we look at food production. By food production, we mean agriculture, but also, of course, the processing of food, which is an important aspect. And then a lot of the courses, of course, deal with the ecological and social problems of today's food system: health issues, social inequalities, justice issues, environmental topics, etc. Climate change, of course, environmental and climate change topics, all of these kinds of issues, and other that are also related to the other program, actually, like the digitalization of the system. On top of these general topics, the master is organized in collaboration with practitioners. So there are a lot of interactions with policy experts in the field. And the first way we do that is by a partnership with ISA. I don't know if you know ISA or JUNIA. This is a renowned agronomy institute that's also part of the Lille Catholic University. And so the students have some courses in common, one course in the first semester and one course in the second semester that they do together with ISA JUNIA. Then, of course, we have numerous interventions from agri-food practitioners, professionals during the different courses. And last but not least, we organize, on top of the study trip about which I've already talked, we organize a lot of field trips. So students go to regional farms, they go to food-related policy events, they go to the Rungis market, because, as you know, it's the largest wholesale food market in the world. So we thought it's interesting for them to go to the Rungis market. To be very honest, it's not the trip they prefer, because they have to wake up at 2 a.m. to be there at 6 a.m. But still, it's rather interesting.
Well, they're used to this, because when you go to Rome with them, as it's sustainable, we don't take the plane, of course, you take the train. So we also have to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to arrive within the same day. So.
A last event, they actually just went last week to the Salon de l'Agriculture. And so that's also something we organize with them. Of course, it's pretty interesting in the framework of this program. So that's the type of things that are part of the program. Perhaps we can have a look just at the maquette. In the right order, but that's okay. The first courses they start with, so again, there are the common courses that I presented to you earlier, but now the core courses, so the courses that are really the largest course of the program. The first one is called Agriculture and Rural Politics. Then they have a course on European food and agricultural policy, and a course called Food History and Culture. That's in the first kind of introductory courses in the first semester. Then, of course, in that year and in the second year, they also have other courses like International Environmental and Climate Politics is one course, Global Food Politics. They also got a project course which is called Food and Sustainable Development, and in which they develop their own little project individually or in group. In the last year, I don't know if you have the maquette. In the last year, they have a course on food controversies, where they actually build controversy files on different issues related to foods, like should we allow GMOs? That's a stupid example, but that's the kind of things that they can work on from a political science perspective. And then, of course, they have a course called Food, Agriculture, and the Environment, which is an option, I think, in the first year, so you won't see it on the slide. In terms of job opportunities, you don't have to go back, because I think they're not in the right order. The program enable students to acquire the knowledge and skill to master and design complex and innovative food policy solutions at the heart of the program. So we want them to occupy key professional positions either in the public sector or in private organizations. In the public sector, they can work at different levels. They can work at the local level, at the national level, for instance, in the Ministry of Agriculture, or environment. And of course, this is also the kind of professionals that international and European organizations are looking for, because they have a strong specialization in one field, which is of course a very important field, especially at the European level. In the private sector, there are also...
I just want to say, for example, in the Rome trip, we have some of our former students who now work for the World Food Program or World Food Organization and the various institutions within. And when we go there, we always organize meeting with them to talk about their career path and how this master and the application process to enter this big international organization worked. So, and we have our former students working there. We trying to keep a link with the institution.
Yeah. And then, of course, there are also job opportunities in the private sectors. I know in the recent past, we had a student that managed the environmental development of a specific company. You know, each company now has an environmental and climate change development plan. So that's typically the kind of thing that our students can do. They can also work in the field of corporate social responsibilities. Okay, so these are the kind of opportunities in the private sectors. Then, of course, some of them will go and work in NGOs as well. Okay. We jump to the next program. I'm not sure in which order I put the slides. Okay, so we go to the JEP program. So the Global and European Politics program is a degree that focuses on the political, social, historical, and even philosophical underpinning of the European Union as a global actor. So we look at the governance and the place in the world, if you want, of the European Union, Europe, and let's say with a specific focus on the European Union. In other words, we look at the different challenges that the European Union is currently facing, and we do that in a kind of multi-level perspectives, looking between public actors. So we talk, of course, about the member states and the interactions of the member states and the interinstitutional setting at the EU level, but also, of course, there are lots of courses that look specifically at EU institutions as such. We also look at private actors. How do companies, networks, NGOs, etc., interact with the EU on a daily basis? I know that's a lot on the news these days, so there are lots of things to say about that. In addition, it's very clear that the European level is, or the supranational and the European level are the stages where most of the major challenges nowadays are at play. So we look at migrations and borders, we look at the questions of the environment and climate change from this perspective, and also questions of democracy and sovereignty. So all these big questions that are raised to all polities in the world, we also look at them from a European and international perspective. And so in terms of the specific courses, I think anyway, you won't be able to read the descriptive. It's more or less what I just said, but in terms of the way the program is conceived, we start with a general understanding of the EU. So I would say that to start this program, it's okay if you have never done a very specific EU institution course, although it's perhaps preferably better to have a little background. So not to have done a full degree on the EU, but to know a bit what the EU is, perhaps what the European Commission is, what the European Parliament is. This kind of basic knowledge would be good because the course, it's a master's course, so it starts at a certain level, obviously. So the first course is a course called European Institutions and Policies that covers the functioning of the EU, but not at the most basic level, let's say. Although it's possible to adapt a bit, of course, to the different students. Then we have a course on European history, which, as I said, is a major field that we look at in this program. We have a course on global governance, the environment and international politics. And then, of course, as I said, in the second year, we try to have more policy-oriented courses. So we have courses, it also goes actually for the second semester because we already have the courses on EU foreign policy. And then we have courses, for instance, on the cultural policies, so cultures and identities in the EU. We have a course on European economic governance that you see on the slide. And for the second year, we also have a course on EU trade policy. So those are really looking more specifically at specific policy fields instead of, thinking about the EU in general. Then we also have a course called Contemporary Issues in European Politics, where here we take more of an issue-based perspective. In other words, for each class, we look at a different big question that kind of transcend the EU polity. In terms of job opportunities, basically the program allows students to work in any field related to the public and private sectors with an European dimension. So basically you can think of any different public or private job that would have a European dimension to it. For instance, in the national public sector, there are lots of job opportunities related to the question of the EU or in link with policies that are driven at the EU level. For instance, again, agricultural policy would be a good example, because that's typically a policy that's first a European policy and that has to be implemented in the nation state. So this is a kind of sector where also the JEP students could work, but of course this works for a huge number of policies. There are also jobs in the political sector per se. It's true that we have some students that go and work in what we call the cabinet, so either with a mayor or an MP, an MEP. Ideally, we would prefer our students to go work for MEP because this has a true European dimension, and we've got some that do internship with MEPs. But then, of course, we also have students that work at the national, in politics at the national level. So I think last year we had a student who worked with the Secretary of State, one of the Secretary of State, I can't say her name, and she managed the communication, for instance, of the Secretary of State, of one of the Secretaries of State in France. So these are the kind of job opportunities that are really fit for our students. Then, of course, in general, our students are also fit for the European and international public sector. They're really well aware of the functioning of the EU, so that's a very good start to do the competition to enter the EU civil service. However, it's true that at the moment we do not offer a specific training for the competition, for what we call the EPSO competition, so entering the public sector at the European level. To be very honest, of course, a lot of our students go and work rather in the private sector, in what we call consultancy and lobbying. I know it has a very negative connotation from a French perspective, but it doesn't at all at the EU level. So it's mostly working on interest representation. It could actually be interest representation of the French regions. I don't know if you know that, but each French region has an office in Brussels to represent itself. So that's a kind of lobbying as well, or working for a company, or working for an NGO. Like if you represent Greenpeace at the EU level, you're also actually doing lobbying. So that's the kind of jobs that, of course, are really good for our students. And then, I don't think I said it, but of course, NGOs. In Brussels, there are lots of NGOs, so that's also a perfect fit for this kind of graduates. I think we're done with this program, and we go to the last one. When I present the international and security master programs, I always used to say, security, it's an important issue, but it's a bit hiding in the political agenda. We don't really see it. It's going a bit behind. It's going to be a bit behind other very important issues. Now I don't have to say that anymore. I think security is everywhere. It's not hidden at all. It's in every political discourse. So it's become, of course, a very important aspect of political life. And so this program looks precisely at that. And in fact, the way we talk about it in everyday life is also an important aspect, even that we talk about in the program. But so the program provides a deep understanding of how security and international security transform the world, transform our world as we see it. So we have both a conceptual nature of the program and a more practical, and I'm going to try to explain how we do that. First, in this program, and that's really similar to the other program, we look a lot at the actors of the security world in general. So we look at those that shape and address security issues in the nation states, but also beyond the nation states. That's why it's also called international, because we still insist very much on the framework of the nation states and how this is still relevant to look at these issues. It's also a multidisciplinary program in the sense that although it's specifically anchored in the field of international relations and security and defense studies, which is kind of a subfield, that's the core of the program, but we also have a number of courses in other domains, namely political theory. We have a course I'm going to show you in a second, it's already there, History of Conceptions of Peace, which is a political theory course. It's also, of course, a lot looking at the sociological dimension of security and terrorism, for instance. And then, of course, history is a very important aspect. So, for instance, the students start with a course on global history in the first semester. I would like to just to state that this program is really much at the heart of what ESPOL is doing in general. I don't know if you knew it, but at ESPOL we have the only BA that's specific to international relation in France, not in the world, is the case elsewhere, but in France there is not such a specific BA elsewhere in the field of political science. And so this is kind of the continuation of this program in the sense that in the BA program, the students look in general at international relations. And here we try to focus more on specific issues, which are, of course, security, terrorism, and conflicts. So that's a specific outlook within this huge field, which is international relations. At ESPOL, we can do this because we have, of course, a leading team of researchers in that domain in France. And so we have a strong team of professors, at least 4 or 5 of them who teach in this program and who are strong specialists on these issues. If you would look at the courses, again, you don't see them very much, but so the students in the first year have, as I said, a course on global history, histories of conception of peace, and in the first semester they have also a course that they usually like very much, which is called Armed Conflict and Peacemaking. Armed Conflict and Peacemaking is like the main course in the first semester. In the second semester, they have also a course on theories of security and contemporary challenges, and a course on sovereignty of the states in international relations. And they also start to have a first course on international law. So that's for the first year. In the second year, we're trying to switch to a more practical outlook at the issue, and we offer them 2 different courses that are called Defense Policy in Practice. And the students very much like that because it's a course where they actually meet professionals, namely in the first semester military officials, but not just to understand, but also to develop a critical outlook toward this kind of profession. So they're able to interact with the military officials, because this is possible because we have a special agreement with the French Army Command, the Commandement des Forces Terrestres here in Lille. So the professionals come to us, and they also, actually the students also go there once to meet them there directly. In the second semester, this course goes on with other types of professionals, namely people from NGOs, journalists, people working in the humanitarian sector, and so on and so forth. So that's the second part of the course that's in the very last semester. So on top of that, students, so it's not on the slide, but students also have optional courses such as cybersecurity and a course on violence, war, and terrorism, which is also an option in the second year. Yeah, perfect. Perhaps just to mention, because I said, the program has a strong research dimension. At ESPOL, we are in a partnership with the IPP, Institut pour la Paix, which is a research center that covers the whole France, but it's going to be located at ESPOL, where we're going to have a lot of research seminars related to this specific issue of war and peace. A lot of the seminars are going to happen directly at ESPOL, so it's also an opportunity for the students to interact not only with military people, but also with researchers. Perhaps it's even more interesting in the end, interacting with researchers directly here in Lille. This program, I think, enables students to acquire all the knowledge and skills that they would need to diagnose security problems and also to design solutions. So we've got lots of students that go on and work, for instance, in the cybersecurity sector. As you can imagine, that's one of the main fields nowadays. But in general, they can occupy positions in the national administration, but also in the local, increasingly at the local level, but also, of course, in international organizations and non-governmental organizations. We've got lots of students that went and worked, for instance, in the migration field, to take care of to take part in NGOs, for instance, and so on and so forth. So this is a kind of job opportunities for students. And perhaps something we didn't mention, but that's perhaps true, especially of the last 3 programs, is that in general, our students are very fit for a career in the research sector as well. So if they want to pursue and work in a think tank, in a research institute, and that's a bit of my dream, but it seldom happens. If they want to do a PhD, sometimes that happens. We also can offer that, or at least we can offer some help to help them build their PhD project to go further. But I understand it's perhaps a bit early when you're in your 2nd or 3rd year to start thinking, oh, am I going to do a PhD? Then you end up like us or something. I don't know if that's appealing, but that's also a possibility that is offered at ESPOL. And we do offer research courses for that purpose, but also we have some extra research design courses if the students are interested in doing that. So again, it can be a PhD in the university system, or it can be, filling a research position in a research institute outside a university, like a think tank. Right? I think there are lots of students who do that.
And maybe, there's also students in the masters that approach us to be research assistants or work with us on research projects. So you get an insight, and then of course you can decide whether you really want to pursue a career in this area or even do a PhD. So we really try, on top of providing you with a practical orientation or like more like a teaching perspective, also to show you how research work by trying to implement you in various projects. We have done this also very successfully with undergrad students, right? So, but of course, at master, it's still another level of including. And we have our big research center, which is ESPOL Lab, which has an access and security, an access and sustainability, which is called the Anthropocene, right? And politics of the Anthropocene. And the last one is about European politics mainly, which and we have various research projects across these 3 where we can include master students if you're really interested in that aspect.
Yeah. And in general, students are very much encouraged to come to our own research activities. So we do organize seminars for the team of researchers and professors at ESPOL. And so students can always come. I keep saying that, and not that many come in the end. So I'm really happy if more and more students choose to come to the seminars, because I think that's a very good addition to what they get in their courses as well. I just wanted to finish perhaps with a few words on how to apply to the masters. So you need to apply directly on the platform. That's the general rule. But then what would you actually need on the platform? The first thing is that to apply to a master's degree, but that's not a big surprise, I think you need an undergraduate degree first. So you don't have to have it now, but you will need to prove that you have successfully finished your undergraduate degree before entering ESPOL in September. So our masters are opened to a very large number of undergraduate degrees, in the sense that we are multidisciplinary, we offer multidisciplinary programs, so we also accept students coming from different backgrounds. By different background, I don't mean an undergraduate degree in physics, obviously, but let's say that if you have an undergraduate degree in any field that's more or less related to the social science field, so it can be sociology, history, economics, all of the history I said already, all of these kind of fields, of course, fit well. However, it's true that an undergraduate degree in political science is a better fit with our program. So if you already have an undergraduate degree in political science, it's going to be slightly easier to get in our master's program.
Maybe just to add, for my master program, of course, if you come with a background maybe of computer science or even engineering, is also very interesting, because what we need is not only, well, political scientists understanding the technical dimension, but people who are working on the technological side understanding the political dimension of their work and whether the societal implication of their work, right? So yeah, can be a physicist and apply to our program. It's digital one, no problem.
Shouldn't have said that. Then the second thing you will need is what we call a personal statement in English. So it's, let's say, it's quite close to a motivation letter, but you need to explain really much your interest in the study program, and why you want this particular study program, why the aim of the study program corresponds to what you're looking for. And perhaps something that I'm always surprised when I read the personal statement is that, of course, you should also try to convince us to take you. So why should we take you, basically, in this particular program? Then you need a CV in English. Sometimes I know this can be kind of a struggle to some extent. So I think it's good to know that you need it, because it might take some time to prepare. But that's something we ask. We also ask for official transcripts of all your undergraduate years, right? So don't forget to upload all of them, including if you've done an exchange degree. We're also interested to see what kind of grades you got during your exchange program or Erasmus program. You also need to provide us with a proof of your English language proficiency. So you can either do a TOEFL test, an IELTS test, a Cambridge test, and I think the website details other possibilities, but those are, and with specific minimum score that we require, but this is a must to enter ESPOL. We want to be sure you are, your level of English, is sufficient to enter, because of course, as you've seen, all the courses are in English. In fact, there is, I think, 2 options in the whole program that are in French, but all the rest, and so you don't have to take it, but that's a possibility, but all of the rest is really in English. So that's, of course, a very important aspect.
Can I ask a question? Is there a waiver for this language criteria if you studied in the UK or come from an English-speaking university background? That might be interesting for some.
Exactly. So you don't need a proof of your language level if you're a native speaker, or if you've done your undergrad in an English-speaking university. Okay, so that's the waiver you were talking about. And then you need 2 academic references, so references from your generally undergraduate professors. They can be in English or in French. Don't do them in Chinese, because then I'm really confused usually. All right. Is there any question? I think we're more or less done. If there are any questions, we can take them. And Gauthier, if there are some questions online, you're also going to tell me, right? So the questions was, when do we hear when we get accepted or rejected or whatever? So we have a rolling process. So you can apply anytime from now to the 1st of May. And we commit to give you an answer within 8 weeks. Okay? But if you applied before the 15th of March, well, that's really close, I know, then you're going to get an answer pretty soon, because we're going to study a first wave of files in the coming week. Okay? It's possible that sometimes we accept students directly, sometimes they have to go through an interview. So that depends on what the admission committee decides. The question is, what's the aim in the program of the language course? Is it to reach a professional level, or is it something else? I would say it depends a bit. So as I say, the non-French native student, they have to take a French course, and that honestly does not have a strong academic reason behind it. It's more that they're living in France, in a French university. We think it's very important that they get some basic knowledge of French. Because otherwise they're going to go home with a French degree, not speaking a single word of French, which I think is a bit strange. However, and they're not required any level to start with in French, obviously, so they can do it at any level. For the French students, the idea is a bit different in the sense that they're going to do an English level course, an English course. Again, there are, I think, usually 2 different levels that are offered. We do require already a quite high level of English to start with. So this is really an improvement. So to really bring their level up, to be able to actually not only do a conversation in French, but really be fit to the requirements of the programs in terms of writing in English, and also, of course, doing presentations and other things in English. You might find strange that we don't do that for the foreign students, but usually the foreign students already come from a background where they're already very fluent, a bit more, I have to say, than the French students. So they don't really need to do that. Usually if they come to France to an English-speaking program only, they already are C1 or C2, almost always. All right. So the question is whether we recommend the Europass format for CVs. So that's a very personal statement I'm going to make. I don't really like the Europass CV. I think it's overcomplicated, and then it's very difficult for you to understand what they want where. So you don't have to use it. Now, if your CV is already under Europass, we're not going to reject it. I promise I'm going to read through the CV, even if they're Europass. But don't bother doing a Europass if you have another CV, because I think just doing a clear CV, perhaps start with your education rather than, sometimes students start with a job position they had, and that's not really relevant. But you can just do a regular CV. You don't have to bother and go through the Europass system. That being said, you have to keep in mind that it's very likely that along the way you might need to do a Europass CV at some point. So perhaps it's useful to start somewhere, and starting to work on a Europass CV will of course be helpful for later if you apply to internships or something else. So you can also think of it in that way. It really depends on the year. So for the digital politics, we don't know because we never had any candidate. But in general, we take 1 out of 3 candidates that apply, something like that. Am I right, Gauthier? I don't have the exact figures, but I think it's around that. Then it depends a bit on the programs and on the year. The ISP program has been the most popular, let's say, in the past 2 years. We had a bit more applicants for the ISP program, and we try to have in each program around 20 students. And that's something I didn't really explain, I think, but we are very insistent to keep the programs small. We don't want to have, huge programs you can find anywhere, especially in Brussels. They have international relations program with hundreds of students or 150 students. That's not at all what we're doing at ESPOL. At ESPOL, we're working with very small groups, also to have this kind of seminars, kind of courses I was talking about earlier. So in general, we have between 20 and 25 students per program. It can even be less. I think last year in the JEB program, we had like 15 students. So.
Yeah, I think it currently averages about 15 students per program. But I mean, they're growing every year. So most likely this year is going to be a bit more, right?
French as a foreign language.
So for the first question, which was whether there is a French as a foreign language also in the digital politics and governance master. Yes, in my knowledge, it's there. So maybe it was not on the slide, but indeed there's the same option or like compulsory course, because again, as my colleague explained, well, they will be living in France. So yes, it would be good that you can go and order your food and then the beer and the coffee, right? That's nice. Ask for directions. So I think yes. And the second was is open governance compatible with our master. For sure. You even have a whole course on introduction to digital governance, which include these aspects. And of course, you can specialize in this domain across different courses. So for sure, it's one of my main interests of research. So I'm sure that it will be there. So yeah.
So the question is how much the transcripts need to be detailed to apply to the program. I think it needs to be as much detail as possible. In the end, you will need to give your official transcript, and on your official transcript, I think all the main courses are there. Now, if a course is composed of very different things, like, I don't know, seminars, a main course, and other types of exercise, and it's just one grade, that's okay. But I think what we really need to see is basically the different types of course you've been through in your undergraduate level. So let's say we at least need the names of the courses, but then if a course is made of several different entities, that's fine to just have the name of the course, okay? But in general, basically, what's on your official transcript is what we want. Are they older? So the question is, are there older students that come to study in the program, or are all the students perhaps under 30, or at least I think I could add, do people like do their undergraduate and then continue with a master at ESPOL? It's true that most students we have just finish their undergrad and then come to ESPOL. That's the majority of students for sure. But then every year we have a few exceptions. For instance, it's increasingly the case that people do a gap year between their bachelor and their masters. And so we have a lot of students that are even now, they already are in the masters, but they are in their gap year and they will join us only in September. So we even internally have these kind of cases, but we also have students that will come now that will apply now that have interrupted their studies in between. And and also we've got a few older students. This year we have a student that's my age actually. So everything is possible. It's all okay. They've been less shy online this time.
Any more questions in the room? No?
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we stay here for a few more minutes if you've got any more questions.
And of course, we hope to see you at ESPOL in September, right?